patience while we gave a little bit more time for more people to join tonight's meeting. We're at 6:05 now. We do have a good amount of people in the meeting, so we are going to get started. I just wanted to start off by giving a few introductions of city staff who are on tonight's meeting. I'll start with myself and I'll introduce all my colleagues. So I'm Daniel Kolominski. I'm a planner in community planning in Etobicoke, York, and I'm the lead of the Multiplex monitoring program. Joining me, we have Brooke Marshall, a senior planner in city planning, one of the leads for the Sixplex citywide study. Jordan Vanderhoeven, a planner in city planning. Hania Butter, assistant planner in city planning. Wilser Cannell, assistant planner in community planning. Daniel Hahn, senior planner in city planning. And Carola Perez Book, project manager within city planning. So tonight we're meeting. We're having a community consultation meeting for the Sixplexes citywide study and the Multiplex monitoring program update. The meeting is scheduled between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. And again, just wanted to thank everybody for joining tonight's consultation. In terms of what we'll be discussing, we will have two presentations from city staff. We'll have a presentation on the Multiplex monitoring program update, and then a presentation on the Sixplex citywide study. At the end of those presentations, we will get into the facilitated question and answer period. I'd just like to acknowledge that tonight's meeting is being recorded, but just so everybody knows, personal information that you use to register for tonight's meeting will not become a part of the public record. That won't be disclosed, but things such as opinions and statements and voice will become part of the public record tonight. I'll start by just acknowledging the land that we're meeting on. So we acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. A couple housekeeping matters for tonight's meeting. We will be taking all of the verbal questions at the end of the presentations during the facilitated question and answer period. If you'd like to participate in that question and answer period, you can type a question into the Q&A function that should be at the bottom of your display, or you can use the hand raised function to let us know that you would like to verbally ask a question. And if you're calling into tonight's meeting, if you press *3, that will raise your hand and will let us know that you have a question. And just a reminder for everyone to please be respectful, as the City of Toronto is an inclusive public organization. Any hateful comments will not be tolerated in tonight's meeting. Just a bit of an overview of what tonight's meeting is and what it isn't. There's going to be a lot of information presented today. There's going to be a very good opportunity here for the City of Toronto, members of the public at large, to get perspective of the initial findings from the first 200 multiplex building permits that have been issued citywide and what is still in the queue. This is going to be a great opportunity for city staff to gain perspective from what members of the public are experiencing on the ground level when it comes to multiplex implementation. And then it's also an opportunity for city staff to present what the city is studying next and ensure that city staff are still respecting a lot of the key goals of what the multiplex housing approval implemented previously. And we also want to just make sure that the meeting tonight is not meant to just specifically focus on the displeasure of any committee of adjustment, application decisions, or troubles that individuals may have with individual city staff at an individual file level. We're looking at trying to get good constructive feedback from members of the public as we continue to study our monitoring efforts of the multiplex program and the Sixplex study citywide. And please do not expect from this meeting for any provincial regulations to be changed or changes to be made to the Ontario Building Code. We're sticking to things that fall within the scope of city planning. So just getting started with a bit of an overview from a planning framework perspective before we get into the presentation materials. I wanted to just show this visual on the screen. This is a map taken from the Toronto official plan. It's our land use map that essentially identifies areas across the city of how the city of Toronto is meant to grow. For a lot of this meeting, or for all of this meeting, we'll be focused on the residential areas within the land use map, primarily the yellow areas within the land use map, which are identified as neighborhoods designations. The neighborhood designation is the largest, covers the largest amount of area across the city of Toronto. There are other areas where residential uses are permitted, like in mixed use areas and apartment neighborhoods, but the yellow areas are where we're focused for this presentation. This is a visual that many people on the call might have seen in other City of Toronto presentations that demonstrate the difference in intensification between the urban centers of the City of Toronto within mixed use areas, within apartment neighborhoods designations where we often see tall buildings or mid-rise buildings, and then the lands that are adjacent to these higher forms of intensification nodes or areas in the city, which are often known as those neighborhood areas designations, which were the yellow lands in the map before us. A lot of what's being discussed is focused on those low-rise neighborhood areas that fall outside of the boundaries of those higher intensification forms across the city. A lot of what's being done at the City of Toronto is in response to the housing challenges that everyone is experiencing in their everyday life. The city is actively looking at trying to create new housing options for people. As the city grows, ages, and evolves over time, we recognize that cities are always changing, and the City of Toronto is actively looking at ways to ensure that we can provide more housing options through updates to land use policies, to zoning bylaws, to guidelines, to ensure that there's a diverse range and mix of housing options for people living in the city from all stages in their life, whether it's seniors looking to age in place or younger individuals who are looking to move out of their parents' home and look for a housing option that's attainable for different household sizes and also different levels of income. City Council has directed city staff to look at a wide range of projects and studies with a real focus of maintaining and protecting the city's housing stock. Many of those projects and studies will be discussed today in this meeting tonight. This is a visual that is meant to show the different options of housing that the city is either actively studying or what is already permitted on a citywide basis. And it's really meant to demonstrate the lowest forms of intensification on the left end of the screen, which are those detached homes, garden suites and laneway suites. And then on the far right of the screen, tall buildings, apartment buildings, mid-rise buildings. And something that will be discussed in great detail tonight is expanding housing options within neighborhoods and looking at trying to add more housing that falls in between the lowest forms of intensification and the highest forms of intensification. A relevant document that the City of Toronto has is called the Housing Action Plan. This is really a roadmap that is meant to unlock more housing options across the whole housing spectrum. So that can range from tackling homelessness, providing more rental housing, long-term care facilities, for seniors, a whole wide range of different housing projects that city staff are actively studying and coming forward with recommendations that city council may end up approving. A sort of another item that falls under the housing action plan, another housing initiative, is the expanding housing options in neighborhoods, otherwise known as EHON, which is really tackling the missing middle. And like I had mentioned in the graphic before this, there are many forms of housing that fall under the missing middle category that are not the tall buildings, and they're not the single detached dwelling units within neighborhoods. Everything that falls in between that. Why is the city expanding housing options in neighborhoods? Well, EHON has already been something that's been studied for a number of years already. So we're well underway in this new policy environment of permitting more options of housing within low-rise neighborhood designated areas. Prior to EHON coming forward, of the yellow land use designation, the neighborhood designation uh, of that land area, which covers about 30% of the entirety of City of Toronto, 70% of those yellow areas were only permitting single detached homes with a secondary suite within the building itself. The city has come a long way since that, in particular since 2023, allowing fourplexes citywide within those residential areas. Focusing on neighborhoods is really key because there's already a vast amount of existing infrastructure within neighborhoods. There's parks, there's schools, there's existing sewer systems. By adding more housing options and bringing density back into neighborhoods in a gradual and low rise way, the city can become more sustainable, more resilient, more equitable, and increase that neighborhood vitality. Like I had mentioned before, the missing middle housing is a great way to try and help elderly folks who are looking to age in place. And through this presentation, you'll see it can be a great way of providing family-friendly type housing with more bedrooms and larger units. This is a visual that's meant to show a typical neighborhood in Toronto. You could see the road network either being winding or grid-like. You could see the low-rise fabric of detached homes or townhouses. And each of the different colored pieces on the map are meant to signify an EHON type building typology. And the introduction of more housing options into neighborhoods is meant to be a gradual introduction of new forms of housing. It does not happen all at once overnight. Not all lots will end up with a different type of housing typology, but over time there can be a gradual introduction of similar housing forms that can still reflect the character of the neighborhood while still allowing for more people to utilize the existing infrastructure in those areas. Just a bit of a recap of some of the council-approved EHON initiatives over the years. In 2019, laneway suites were approved citywide. In 2022, garden suites were approved citywide. In 2023, multiplexes of up to 4 units were approved citywide. In May of 2024, the major streets housing form, which is 4-story townhouses or up to 6-story walk-up apartments on a major street, was approved. However, it was appealed to the OLT and it still remains under appeal. In the Beaches East York, Ward 19, there was a pilot project for a walk-up apartment there that was approved in 2024. And then most recently in Ward 23 in Scarborough, there were sixplexes approved specifically within that ward in February of 2025. a bit of a quick recap on what multiplexes are. So like I had mentioned, multiplexes up to 4 units received council approval in May of 2023 across all the yellow neighborhood areas, as you can see on the map on the screen. One of the key methodologies and thinking behind the multiplex approval or the multiplex bylaw and official plan amendment was a think inside the box approach, which was we're all aware that there is a list of zoning performance standards that sets the height, the side yard setbacks, the front yard setback, and the rear yard setback for a building envelope, which creates a box. And if we were to look at allowing for more units to be located within that box, then effectively you are setting the size requirements of that built form, but provides a little bit more flexibility for multiplexes to utilize those building envelope permissions. Some of the other changes that were made in association with the multiplex bylaw, the main change that many of people are aware of was that multiplexes were exempted from the floor space index regulation, which is essentially regulating how much density can occur within the building envelope. That, along with a few other changes, were made. Multiplexes have permission citywide to be built up to 10 meters. But in some cases where the existing residential zoning permits a building height of, let's say, 12 meters, the multiplex is permitted to go to that same permission, whichever is greater. There were other changes for building length and building depth and then as well as setback requirement changes to match the setback requirements for the residential zone that the multiplex is proposed in. There's also still lot coverage that regulates multiplexes as well. I'm going to go into a little bit about the multiplex monitoring program to date. This is a bit of a timeline recap. Like I had mentioned, multiplexes received council approval in May of 2023. At that point in time, a monitoring team was established to assess the impacts of multiplex implementation. That looks at impacts to tree canopy, transportation impacts like how many parking spaces there might be on residential streets or on private property, school capacity assessment, Toronto Water review, and other commenting partners either inside the city or external to the city. Between September and December of 2023, we did our first data poll of multiplex building permits. We noticed that many of the permits that were submitted at that time were for renovations and additions, not for entirely new builds. At this point in December of 2023, Council also directed city staff to study the potential of 5 units and up to 6 units citywide as well. Between March and November of 2024, we did our second and third data poll of multiplex building permits. At that point, by November 2024, we did hit 200 building permits for multiplexes being issued citywide, which was the trigger to then report back to Planning and Housing Committee with our monitoring findings. Where we are right now, we're continuing to assess the impacts of the multiplexes citywide. We've had a few consultation meetings as a monitoring team. We met with residents associations across the 4 districts. We had 1 meeting per district. We did have an industry-focused workshop meeting in February of this year, and we're now having our citywide consultation meeting. And we are looking forward to bring forward a monitoring final report with associated zoning bylaw amendments to Planning and Housing Committee in June of this year. So now I'm going to get a little bit technical. There's going to be a lot of data presented here. These are the initial findings. We wanted to present things sort of at a glance of the first 200 building permits. So what you could see on the screen is a bar chart of 222 multiplex building permits that have been issued. Of the 222 permits, there are 71 duplexes, 83 triplexes, and 68 fourplexes. We've noticed that there's a pretty even distribution of different multiplexes. It's not all one type of multiplex. It seems to be spread out pretty evenly. In terms of number of units, this has resulted in 663 total units amongst all the multiplexes and approximately 393 new units that didn't exist previously. We're also aware of an additional 250 multiplex permits that have been issued between May 2023 and November 2024. However, city staff are only doing our very detailed review on the 200 permits, but we're still aware of these additional permits that have been issued. And just in a comparison, when it comes to garden suites, for example, between 2022 and January 2025, there were about 396 permits issued for garden suites. So multiplexes do have a higher frequency compared to the other EHON counterpart. In terms of permit types, like I had mentioned, majority of the permits for multiplexes are small residential projects, meaning they're interior renovations or building additions. Within that 222 permit set, we have 64 new houses. Where things are at in the review stage, there's about 42 permits that have been closed, and majority of permits are still in the sort of post-issued stage, but not yet closed. From a geographical perspective, this is a map of the whole city of Toronto. The yellow areas shows the neighborhood designated areas across the city. So these green dots on the map show where the 222 multiplex permits have been issued citywide. We're going to be reviewing to see if there's any reasons as to why there's certain areas across the city that have a higher number of multiplexes than other areas of the city. We can see from this information that there is a certain part of the city that does happen to have a few more permits than others. I do have a bar chart to expand on that in a little bit more detail. So in terms of the most, the busiest wards across the city for multiplex permits, Ward 9, Davenport, has the most with 35, and that is effectively in that area on the map we saw just previously. York Southweston, Ward 5, has 22 multiplexes. University Rosedale, Ward 11, has 19. Parkdale High Park has 17, which is Ward 4. There's less multiplexes in the northern part of North York and in the outer areas of Scarborough from what we're seeing in the 222 permits. In terms of what we're seeing for the lot size for these multiplexes, this has been broken down into duplex, triplex, and fourplex. We've noticed that the total lot area for fourplexes, lot frontage, and lot depth tend to be on the higher side of things, which is what we were anticipating to see more fourplexes on larger lots. Triplexes tend to be on lots that are a little bit smaller. And I am aware that lots within Ward 9, Davenport, do happen to have a smaller lot dimension. So that's kind of consistent and expected with what we're seeing. And duplexes, that lot fabric is sort of almost like a combination of the fourplex and triplex. But what we're seeing in terms of lot sizes is what city staff were already kind of anticipating. I think this is a really informative and interesting data point. We've been tracking in detail the number of bedrooms, the overall size of multiplex units, and the overall sizes of the bedrooms within those multiplexes. We've broke this down into each multiplex typology, so duplex, triplex, and fourplex. On average, we're seeing about 2.4 bedrooms per unit within a duplex. We're seeing about 2 bedrooms per unit in triplexes, which would then equate to about 6 bedrooms for the whole building. And we're seeing about 2 bedrooms per unit for fourplexes for about 8 bedrooms in the entire fourplex. From a bedroom size point of view, we're seeing over 10 square meters per bedroom. 11.2 square meters up to 14.5 square meters. I think that this is a great indicator demonstrating that family size, family friendly type units are being proposed or delivered through multiplex housing. We have another visual on the screen, which is the growing up guidelines, which city staff utilize to review tall building applications or mid-rise building applications for higher forms of intensification. These do have ideal unit sizes and ideal number of bedrooms per unit. Based on what we're seeing in the multiplex data, the multiplex units and number of bedrooms are exceeding what is called for in the growing up guidelines, which is a great indicator that these units are, again, family friendly and family oriented, which is in alignment with the recommendations of the multiplex official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment from 2023. In terms of what's happening with regard to height, we're seeing on average about 2.5 stories for fourplexes and triplexes. For duplexes, closer to 2 stories. This is also sort of consistent with what we would anticipate, where fourplexes might be closer to 3 stories. Duplexes and triplexes could be sort of within that 2-story envelope. We're actively looking at parking as well. So there's a lot of information within the tables on the screen. I'll try and clearly articulate what we're seeing. So of the 222 multiplex permits that have been approved, that resulted in about 663 residential units. We are seeing 239 roughly parking spaces on private property, which equates to about 1 parking space per permit, or about 0.36, just over 33% of parking being provided in comparison to all of the residential units. So there is still parking being provided on site. It's not at a 1 parking space per unit ratio, but it's not happening. It's not 0 parking spaces on these properties where multiplexes are proposed. There are still parking spaces provided. We are getting a review from Transportation Services to let us know how many on-street parking permit applications have been submitted to the city in association with these multiplex permits, so that we can get a sense of if there is on-street parking happening on residential streets. We had a lot of questions from the Residents Association meetings about tree canopy. So this is information that is actively coming in from our urban forestry department. We're still going to be reviewing this, so things are subject to change. But based on the 222 multiplex permits that have been issued, we're aware that there's been 51 applications made to the city to either injure or remove a tree. Of those 51 applications, 41 of those applications have been issued to the applicant to either injure or remove the tree. This has resulted in a total of 49 trees being injured and 47 trees being removed. there's still 10 applications that have been submitted that are either not actively being pursued by the applicant, still under review, or potentially might end up getting canceled. In terms of committee of adjustment activity, this information is still subject to change as we continue to look at a deeper level of how many multiplexes are going to the committee of adjustment. And we will be breaking it down into a more detailed review of the 222 permits, how many of those went to the committee of adjustment. But this is data at large for all multiplexes that have gone to the committee of adjustment. This fortunately shows information dating back to 2000 of how many minor variance applications were submitted to the Committee of Adjustment since 2000 to 2025 associated with a multiplex. We're aware of what looks to be about 214 Committee of Adjustment applications last year for multiplexes. There is a more nuanced and more detailed level of zoning bylaw regulations across certain areas of the city referred to as Chapter 900 variances. These Chapter 900 variances prevail over the multiplex bylaw. So multiplexes are required to go to the Committee of Adjustment if they're subject to Chapter 900 exceptions. And last year in 2024, we saw about 23 Chapter 900 Committee of Adjustment applications and 11 in 2023. It's noteworthy as we get into sort of the zoning bylaw amendment changes that we're looking to make. I'll refer back to this point. Some of the challenges that we're hearing from a zoning level, there are issues when it comes to zoning bylaw interpretations, whether it be an applicant submitting a multiplex application to the city, and there is a complication with how to properly define what's being proposed. Like I had mentioned, Chapter 900 exceptions, those prevail and supersede the multiplex bylaw requiring multiplexes to go to the Committee of Adjustment. We're also aware that from a financial perspective, fourplexes were exempted from development charges, and garden suites and laneway suites are subject to a development charge deferral program. But we're aware of an issue where if someone is proposing a fourplex and a garden suite, or a fourplex and a laneway suite, if both are shown on the same permit or they're not broken up, then that individual is getting charged development charges on all 5 units. So that's something that is creating a sequencing problem. We're aware that there's some current Ontario Building Code requirements that can create challenges for how you design the internal layout and exit points for a multiplex. We're aware of Toronto Hydro connection process challenges. Toronto Hydro is a commenting partner with the monitoring program. And then we've also heard from the residents a lot of concern about proper enforcement when it comes to the building permits that are submitted, making sure those are properly showing how the building is meant to be built. When it comes to inspections from city staff going out on site and inspecting what's built, and then also the tree removal process. We've heard a lot of concerns from residents that people are not following the proper procedures when it comes to protecting trees or removing trees or injuring trees the right way. I just wanted to briefly touch on the Ontario regulation additional residential units, ARUs. The provincial government did come forward with legislation in November that applies to a maximum of 3 units on a lot. This could be secondary suites, laneway suites, garden suites, and triplexes, for example. That did change certain zoning bylaw requirements like angular planes, the minimum separation distance between a garden suite and a main building, the removal of floor space index when there are 3 units on a lot, among a few other changes. Many of those changes are not necessarily that impactful to multiplexes, but they do impact, like I mentioned, other things like laneway suites and garden suites. And the City of Toronto will be coming forward with a report and a zoning bylaw amendment to align with the provincial changes. Some of the changes that city staff are looking to make when it comes to the multiplex bylaw, we are actively looking at a way to correct some interpretation issues. So we are aware that there are times where a semi-detached multiplex is being reviewed as an apartment building, not multiplexes. That's a change we're coming forward with. We are coming forward with a change to override the multiplex bylaw by giving permission. Sorry, the multiplex bylaw would override the Chapter 900 exceptions that are requiring multiplexes to go to the Committee of Adjustment. There's a few other technical changes that we're looking to put forward, such as internal conversions of a multiplex to another multiplex. So, for example, a duplex to a fourplex, ensuring those permissions are there. We are looking to input a maximum number of bedrooms per unit for the multiplexes as well. This is also based on things that we're hearing from the public, from applicants, and from city staff. We're also looking at a few technical performance standard changes, like no reverse slope driveways for a multiplex and rooftop use restrictions. So with that, thank you very much for listening to the Multiplex Monitoring Program presentation. I'm going to pass it to Brooke Marshall to talk us through the Sixplex citywide study.
Thanks, Daniel, and good evening, everyone. So let's just dive straight into what we're actually talking about here. We've just heard about multiplexes, which until now have been anything up to 4 units within a building. But now we're looking at whether or not and how we could permit an additional 2 dwelling units in those same buildings. And for clarity, we're looking at detached homes only. We're not considering extending these permissions into semi-detached or townhouses. So the focus of this study really is looking at 5plexes, so 5 dwelling units in a detached home, or 6 units, a sixplex, in a detached home. There is no comment or review on whether the status of those dwelling units might be rentals, small-scale condominiums, maybe even cooperatively owned. So all of that is separate from anything that we're doing here. That's something that can be worked out by the landowner or the developer. And this would include both purpose-built and converted detached homes. Next slide. So a quick timeline on where this idea came from. As Daniel mentioned, in May of 2023, when the original multiplex project was going for final report consideration at council, direction was given to staff to undertake area-specific study of the opportunity to extend multiplexes to 6 units, but looking at Ward 23 for these extended permissions. In December of 2023, council also directed this type of study to be included as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund application to the federal government. And then between March and November of 2024, the significant amount of work was undertaken to bring these permissions forward in Ward 23. The zoning bylaw was not appealed, and at this time is in force and effect. And direction for monitoring was given to staff so that they could be undertaking the same process in Ward 23 that Daniel is completing for multiplexes citywide. Currently, now that Ward 23 is in place, we're expanding this review to look across the city to see how 5 and 6 units could be introduced. We're including in our analysis the impacts of additional units on trees, on parking, on school capacity, on water and sewerage capacity, Toronto Hydro, and all of the other considerations that Daniel has spoken about and that we've spoken to many members of the public about in the last several weeks. We held 4 residents association meetings earlier in the month, 1 per district. We've also been out at 3 in-person consultation meetings, 1 in Scarborough, 1 in Etobicoke, and 1 in North York. We have 1 at City Hall tomorrow evening, if you'd like to join us there. And then the final report recommending 5 and 6 units in detached residential buildings is intended to go forward for the June cycle of Planning and Housing Committee and City Council. And then following that, we are undertaking additional analysis, especially for very narrow lots or corner lots, oddly shaped lots, those kinds of things that can pop up across the city, but that may take a little bit more refinement in the performance standards. And we're looking to bring a report forward on any additional refinement to the performance standards at the end of the year of this year. Next slide. So, and this is just a little bit more detail on the specific direction that we received. This is the motion, this is the recommendation from the Housing Accelerator Fund report in 2023 that introduced consideration of 5 or 6 units as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund application for the City of Toronto. Next slide. So just for context, and to remind everyone, we're talking about expanding these permissions into all of the lots in all of the residential zones across the city. And we decided this time, unlike in earlier EHON presentations, to have the colors of the different zones differentiated, just so folks can have a look at, where they are and how they are spread out across the city, just as general information. Next slide. So let's go back to the box that Daniel was talking about. Part of what we have been tasked with doing is to see if 5 and 6 units can fit within the same box that was brought forward as part of the original multiplex study. And so what we are doing is not proposing any changes to any of the permissions and performance standards that were introduced as part of the citywide multiplex, so 4-unit permissions back in 2023. So except for the addition of 2 units, so up to 6 units, building on the Ward 23 work, we are maintaining the same maximum height of up to 10 meters citywide. The floor space index requirement is continuing to not be applied. And the additional permission for additional building length on narrower lots that have extra depth, so that are longer than 36 meters deep, has also been maintained and is being brought forward. Next slide. So we wanted to do a little bit of design testing and look at 3 sort of typical lot sizes. And while we appreciate that there are very few lots that could be considered to be the same as each other across the city, we do have some typical lot sizes that we wanted to have a look at. So the first one we're looking at here is a wide lot. And this is a lot that's just under 13 meters wide, has a depth that is on the shallow side, so it's just under 33 meters deep, so it would count as a shallow lot like we were just discussing. And the building length permissions for this model is 17 meters. And in this case, we were able to arrange dwelling units up to 6 and maintain the 3-story height limit, be able to accommodate 2 larger units that are approximately 80 square meters. And then the average of the additional units is approximately 70 square meters. So these dwelling units are relatively similarly sized. And as you can see in the cross section on the slide, are generally in keeping with each other and can be easily accommodated in this build form. Additionally, you'll see in the upper image that we've also modeled an integrated garage that is capable of holding 2 cars, so that we can actually see how that space could be accommodated as part of the Sixplex proposal. Next slide. Next, we wanted to move to a mid-width lot. So this is one that's a little bit narrower. This one is approximately 10 meters wide. It still has a shallow lot depth, but this time it's a little longer. It's 33.9 meters. And similarly to the last bit of modeling, does not require additional length to be modeled or used to accommodate the 6 units. Similarly, the 3 stories are able to be maintained. And this while proposing one larger unit that's over 100 square meters in interior space, with the other units having an approximate average of 50 square meters. Similarly to the wide lot, there are 2 parking spots modeled on this design. You can see the driveway on the right-hand side, the upper side of the 3D model, with 2 parking spaces on the surface at the end at the back of the yard. Next slide. And then the third lot we are testing is a narrow lot, and this is more typical of the older parts of Toronto. So this lot is under 8 meters wide. It's just about at the dividing line between a shallow and a deep lot. And in this case, because of the narrowness of the lot, additional building length has been required to accommodate the 6 units. But we're able to maintain the 3 stories and accommodate 1 unit that's the largest of the modeled units in these 3 modeling examples, The larger unit is approximately 135 square meters. And the other units average at approximately 61 meters squared. On this one, because of the size of the lot and its orientation and narrowness, no parking has been modeled on the site. Next slide. So we are in the middle of the consultation process, as you can see on the slide. We will be moving forward to start drafting the report once we are finished with all of our consultation, and that will be moving forward to Planning and Housing Committee on June 12th, with City Council on June 25th, I believe is when that meeting begins. So this is your opportunity to comment. I know many of the folks participating tonight have also been out at other meetings, and we're very glad to hear your, increased commentary and additional fine detail that you've been offering to us over the course of this consultation period. Next slide. And we just wanted to let you know what the next phases of work are with a little bit more detail. So once this report goes forward in June, depending on the outcome, we are aiming to begin analysis of those additional refinement of performance standards for 5 and 6plexes in detached homes. And as I mentioned before, this would be for narrow, shallow, or unusually shaped lots. We've also been asked to see if there is any need for a fourth story to potentially expand the size of units or the flexibility of some of the units in these developments. And then in the longer term, we're looking to simplify and modernize the zoning bylaw by working to simplify the types of definitions that we have in place for different building types, as well as how we describe the interior uses of some of them. Next slide. Great. We'll move on to the facilitated question and answer period. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to get started with questions and answers. We have, so just in terms of some next steps and things to do, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the raised hand icon. Feel free to raise it. For those of you who have had your hand raised throughout the meeting, we have been keeping track, so we have a list, and you can feel free to put your hand down if you so choose. And there's also a Q&A button at the bottom that has a number of comments in there, and staff are also working to both collect the questions and answers and also reply to them. And I think we're ready to get started on the Q&A. Daniel, Brooke, all good to start?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
So
Go ahead.
Alfie Beauchamp, I'm going to unmute you. So you should be able to speak now, and feel free to share your question or comments.
I think what might have happened there was maybe we unmuted Alfie and then Alfie might have muted self. Alfie, just raise your hand again and we'll see you in the queue, and we'll try and go back to you shortly.
Yeah, we might. I'm looking and I see that Alfie is still unmuted. It might be a double mute situation, but let's move on to the next, and Alfie will return to you. So next up is Scott. So Scott, I'm trying to find you. And you should be unmuted. Scott? I'll try one more time.
Yep.
We can hear you now.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for taking my call. I'm wondering, and Alfie was going to talk about the fourplex experience we went through at the C of A with 40 Snowden. So when she gets on, she can do that. But it was a fourplex that was heard at the C of A few weeks ago and was denied. It was very complicated, and it had about 85 letters of objection. So I just really don't know if I'm making a comment or asking a question. I guess I'll turn it into a question. But the lesson we learned, these things are complicated. There are variances that come up that weren't expected and that weren't found, and that they can be very unfavorably received by the neighborhood. So will the continuation of the monitoring study and the rollout of the Sixplex program document the concerns that the neighborhoods have and the negative impacts that were experienced? And will the program then be modified as it goes on to take these things into consideration as we move forward? Because we're really concerned that given that these are allowed in every neighborhood in Toronto, the way that our low density neighborhoods are going to look in 20 years is going to be very different than it looks now. So I would guess we're asking for a little bit of recognition of the impacts that these could have on our existing neighborhoods. So can you just explain, maybe Daniel, how you're going to recognize that and maybe incorporate that into the policy going forward? And thanks for taking my question.
Yeah, I could start off. Thanks, Scott, for the question, the thoughtful question, and I know that you've been actively, I guess, speaking to members at the city about that one particular file. But what I could say is, and what can I commit to is yes, the monitoring report that will eventually go to Planning and Housing Committee will, in a very detailed way, document everything that we've heard from residents associations in those consultation sessions, from what we're hearing in tonight's consultation session, and then from what other members at the City of Toronto have heard through other either workshops or meetings that have been had with members of the public, and that will form part of the report. Now, we're going to examine the issues and impacts that are raised, and where there is sort of alignment and agreement of where an impact may actually need a change in the bylaw or in a policy, then staff can come forward with that recommendation. We're still in the process of refining our recommendations back to council with our associated zoning bylaw changes. So we're still continuing to look at that. But to answer your question, yes, everything that we hear from the community does come forward in that report. So it is out there.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott, for the question. Alfie, we're going to return to you. So your microphone should be unmuted and you should be able to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so to build, thank you very much for having us tonight. I think it's a great opportunity for us to state a few comments. And I'm glad to see that there's been some improvement in a few aspects of the plexes, such as the negative slope for parking. I think that was a very big oversight and that needed to be accomplished, as well as also the rooftop, because it is a privacy issue, and I think it needs to be in place at the same level as a terrace or a cafe terrace or a restaurant terrace would make noise, etc. But I've got a few more points to make because Sixplex are really, for some neighborhood, out of scales. It doesn't fit all lots, and you've showed in your presentation that it needs to be fitting with the character of the neighborhood. I overheard that the character aspect is not anymore part of the Ontario plan. I'd like to assume it still is, because I think it would be very important to keep. I've got more points, so I'll let you answer my questions at the end if you don't mind. I think there's a lot of assumptions that are made on Sixplexes, and you said that majority of them are renovations. But the reality is there's going to be some new builds. And you've said there's starting to be some new builds. Although the FSI is removed, I think the size of the house on the lot is going to be very, very important to monitor, not only for storm water issue, but also stream, but also just the density of that lot that will be so close to the neighbors. And I'm thinking in that case, the thought of thinking about the ability of a plex to include a basement area as a common area, a rooftop, you've talked about it, but with a hot tub, is that going to be allowed? Emergency staircase and on top balconies, should that also be not included in the box? Because then we end up with a huge building that could be built way over the box that you're saying. There's a reality also of family in the neighborhood. The family has an SUV, maybe two. There's kids, there's bikes. The garbage bins are full. There's three garbage. There's a lot of reality of just thinking about the bicycles. You know, when you change a single house to a fourplex, where are we going to put the bicycles of the kids? There might be 16 bicycles suddenly in front of the house. So I think those are just common sense and the reality of a family that is going through my mind. For us and for our neighborhood, the parking is an issue for security reason. I think it really needs to be thought of, and it's seen in your slides that only we're not reaching the 1-to-1 ratio, and by far it's a third, I believe. And so I've got a big concern about parking issue. There's traffic issue in Toronto that really needs, I think that should be a priority. The underground stream, the water, the flooding, it could be in some area a huge problem. And that I'm concerned because I think the problem will arise and it's going to be too late. And it's going to be to the burden of the neighborhood, of the adjacent neighbors to pay for that. And I've seen surrounding here in my neighborhood, French drain being installed, flooding coming through the houses, and who's paying for it? My insurance. So I don't think that's fair to call density in some neighborhood at the expense of the neighbors. And I think few examples have been raised of 84 people opposing to an application, 52 in another application. Many application demands the whole neighborhood to group together in a couple of weeks to be heard. And Scott just mentioned that, so I won't repeat it. But I think it's not only a handful of unhappy neighbor, it's a whole community coming together and warning you, your team, that you should take your time. And time is of essence when you want to really better plan a city and make sure that the city has no consequences or irreversible damage. Last point I'm going to make is on the process. I have to say that the process is not there robust right now to allow the planning department, building department, and resident to all come together and come with an agreement of what should be allowed. And I'm saying that because we had an experience where plans were changed at the last minute and resident couldn't participate in that. So we felt although we spent so much time, so much energy to try to have some hearing from the city and all the planning department to say, whoa, whoa, be careful, because you're going to destroy the city by wanting to go too fast. There is place for density, for sure, but there's a way to go about it, and I think it should be taken ward by ward, area by area, and not having a one size fits all.
Thank you very much for the comments, Alfie. Next, we're going to go to Adriana. Adriana, so I am going to unmute you. You're unmuted, and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
Hey, Daniel, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm concerned to the fact that the city is having one view, one application of these plans. I live in Tobico, Ward 2, a high flooding area, and I think the city needs to take the specifics of each ward neighborhood. In the last flooding, I was cleaning sewage water from my basement. And the reason we have this flooding is because I was storm system and sanitary system are outdated. They are so old, they are back to 1950s. And we see in our neighborhood small bungalows being converted to big mansions, right? So it's more pressure in our sewage, storm, and sanitary system. I learned all this through the process of contacting with the city. When I purchased this house in 2020, I was aware of the risk, but I relied in the city budget information. The city had approved the replacement of our storm and sanitary system to avoid floods. So now, during your presentation, the first person, I forgot his name, he did a good job, but unfortunately I could not see any of the slides. It would be nice for the next presentation for someone to give a feedback to him if the slides are actually on screen. So anyways, so since 2020, there's a budget approved to replace the sanitary system, and it's been 5 years, it's constantly postponed. And in the presentation, I clearly heard that, well, we're going to go to inside the neighborhoods because they already have the infrastructure. They have already have the sewage system. That's a very incorrect information that was probably concluded in a different neighborhood, not in most of the neighborhoods in Etobicoke. So we need to be careful. We need to be careful because in the end of the day, I agree with the second attendant. In the end of the day, if we're not careful with these projects, we homeowners are gonna have to pay for the cost, for the extra cost, right? And my concern, my number two concern is garbage. I went to the PDF is on the website, but I don't see any information about how the garbage bins are gonna, where the garbage bins are gonna be collected. Are you gonna have a management company dealing with this unit to make sure that we don't have problem with garbage? Because in Etobicoke, again, we have a wildlife here, right? We have foxes, we have coyotes, we have you name it. We are very careful with our garbage, right? So these are my major concerns, and I'd like to take it into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. I'll hand it over to Brooke or Daniel for a response.
Sure. I'll take a crack at it first. So one of the things I want to let you know is that we're working very closely with City of Toronto Solid Waste staff to have a look at what the options are, specifically for fiveplexes and sixplexes, to see if there are additional ways that they are considering having garbage storage required, or how bins can be managed for this size of building with this number of dwelling units in it. Generally, garbage in buildings that have fewer than 30 dwelling units in them, and that includes small apartment buildings and small condos, are managed through the use of bins similar to the ones you have at your house. Solid Waste has let us know that sometimes there are slightly larger bins that can be used, especially in more of a condominium or rental type arrangement where the entire building pays their share of the cost of the garbage collection and the bins, and that the garbage is collected in a series of shared bins, but they're still picked up at the curb like the rest of the garbage collection in the area. But it is something we're looking at and working with that team on. Daniel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered a lot of it, Brooke. I'll say that in the multiplex monitoring report that's coming forward, we do have Solid Waste as a commenting partner, giving us an impact assessment on the first 222 building permits to let us know if there are any pain points across the city and if there happens to be a concentration of multiplex permits in an area that is challenging for solid waste to serve. So that will come forward in the monitoring report. And if there are issues, then we can always look at adjusting and making different recommendations. I think that covers it, Daniel.
Thank you both for the responses. Next on my list is Christy. So Christy, I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome. Christy?
Can
Hi,
you hear
welcome.
me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. Your review of the multiplexes, thank you for doing everything, looked at the number of bedrooms being built. It looked at parking being included, whether it was a reno or a new build. And I get it, you're trying to hit numbers. But what was glaringly missing for me was the impact that it has on the surrounding neighbors and the neighborhood. And I think a few people have said this already. But given that you've already had meetings with several areas of the city, I would have appreciated a little more understanding on your slides that showed concerns that were raised. I think residents was like a small bullet point at the bottom. And I think, you know, we're the ones that are going to have to live with these structures in our neighborhoods. And we have, I think, what are very valid concerns about the impacts and what it does on our quality of life, having large buildings sort of planted into low residential neighborhoods. So right now, for me, it felt like your message throughout the presentation was that things are going well. I sort of got the sense that that was the tone that you will be taking forward as you head to city council. And I just wanted to say, on behalf of what I know is many people, I strongly disagree that what's happening is going well. And I think that the idea that we're building inside the box and building what, you know, would be a large home in the neighborhood and just adding more units in it is not what's happening. Until houses are allowed patios on the roof and, you know, extra meters going back close to people's fences, it's just creating a situation that's, you know, ruining the quality of life for the people around it. And I feel strongly, you know, for example, most people have their kitchens and their family rooms on the lower level of their home. And that area is protected by a fence that goes around their house. Their bedrooms are on the second floor, you know, shades are drawn. When you suddenly have 4 stories or possibly 6 stories going up in the back of your home, you have suddenly families and people looking into your living space that you never had before. So I just want to make it known that I don't think you've accounted for the impact on the neighbors. And if the message is it's going well, I would strongly disagree with that.
I'll just jump in, Daniel, and thank you for the feedback. It's much appreciated, Christy. I'll note again that in the multiplex monitoring final report that will come forward in June, we are going to have a detailed review of consultation that we heard from the Residents Association members and community members who participated in tonight's meeting. So that will form a large chunk of the report, so the voices will be heard. I'm sorry to hear that you feel like that wasn't put forward enough in the presentation, but I appreciate you sort of bringing those points forward in this public setting tonight, making those things known. But we will continue to work on that messaging in moving into the final report as well, to make sure that the neighborhood voices are being heard.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Christy, for your comments. Next up on my list, we have Dan. So Dan, I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak now. Welcome.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm going to approach this more from a like a financial feasibility standpoint. I'm a small developer, part of a group of small developers as well. And we think that there's kind of a missed opportunity or some red tape or regulatory oversight that we're seeing for the current missing middle for the 4+ laneway or 4+ garden suite. As you mentioned, Daniel, regarding basically
Sequencing of permits.
Yeah, the permits of having the sequential permit of having you have to do the 4-unit first and then do your garden suite later. That is adding months and months and months and dollars and dollars and dollars to these projects. And I know myself and a number of other developers, we're holding off on building these. And basically what that translates to the city of Toronto is getting less units because we're holding off because this doesn't make sense. Not that it doesn't pencil, but it's pretty close to not penciling, right? There's better things to do out there than wait 18, 24 months to get a development project when, you know, if a 4+ laneware, 4+ garden suite could be built all at once and have all your development fees waived, people like us would be jumping on it right away and bringing units to the city of Toronto, obviously as long as they meet, you know, all the regulation. But yeah, it's a very strange thing to have to go through. I mean, the city has done really well with allowing the laneways, bringing in the garden suites, and doing these programs. But I feel like we're falling short right here. This is a missed opportunity. And in regards to the sixplexes, I'm hoping that we don't miss opportunities there as well, by, you know, having 6 units development charges waived, perhaps even, you know, the garden suite changing the angular planes, or allowing a duplex in the garden suite, so you can have 4 units in the front, 2 units in the back, depending on the size of the lot, and perhaps even, you know, align. This all kind of aligns with the CMHC MLI Select program, which will only be around for, you know, who knows how long. It'll be a short period of time. You know, the rules tend to change. So I'm hoping that the city kind of aligns with the opportunity of, you know, the CMHC program being here, right? So with these 6 units, we can easily get our 100 points. We may be able to easily throw in 1 unit of affordability. So we can actually add affordable units to the city. Not all developers are, you know, money hungry, whatever. A lot of us would like to see an accessible unit or an affordable unit, and adding that 6 there with no development charges, and being able to build it all at once, whether you do it, you know, 6 in main building or 4 and maybe 2 in the laneway or 2 in the garden suite, that would be fantastic. And, you know, smaller developers like us would be jumping all over this and bringing these units to the city and adding affordable units as well, which the city very well needs.
So thank you for that. The one comment I would make about DCs is currently there is a parallel project underway reviewing development charges. It's not being run by anyone on the call right now, but maybe Daniel, you're aware of any timing they might have on the end of that review, but I know it's underway and they're aiming to be bringing something back end of the year, more or less, but I'm not sure if you have a tighter
Yeah.
update than that.
Yeah, and end of the year is what we've heard on changes to the DC bylaw. It could always get accelerated if council members were to move motions asking for things to come forward faster. We've seen some other municipalities come forward with development charge changes in sort of a faster time period. But yeah, all we could say at this point is at the end of the year there could be changes, but it doesn't fall within the scope of either of these projects. But your points are definitely well heard. I do think that there could be more alignment amongst all the different levels of government of aligning housing projects with programs that are available, so that there's no sort of disconnect and there's not a sequencing issue that causes a cog in the process. So appreciate you coming out and letting us know about some of the things that you're dealing with at the ground level.
Thank you, Dan, for the question and comment, and thank you, Dan, for the response.
A lot of
Next
Daniel.
up, a lot of Daniels on this call. Next up, we have Anthony McMahon. So, Anthony, I am going to unmute you, and you should be able to speak. Welcome. Yep, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank staff for all the work on this. I think it's really great. I don't know if anyone's a fan of British politics, but the current Prime Minister always used to say, I support the government and I call on them to go further. I think that this project could go a little bit further in terms of the permissions allowed. I just want to say one Quick thing, which is I know there's concerns about property values. I'm a renter and I live in a fourplex in a neighborhood that's allowed this kind of built form for like basically about 150 years. And we have the highest property values in the city. So if you're concerned about neighbors decreasing property values, I really don't think that's a thing. There are obviously other concerns, but I trust staff are able to address those issues. My concern as a renter, I know that Dan brought up affordability. I know that there's been some reports that have come forward that have shown that a lot of these projects, like they don't pencil out even as condo, which is, I mean, until the recent interest rate environment was usually the best ROI. They never pencil out as affordable. Did staff consider getting a consultant, a financial consultant or something, to develop what would be required for these to be even just market rentals, and then work backwards from there so that they would be actually viable in a lot of parts of the city? Because currently these permissions, like you can't do them in large portions of the city. You'll never get the loan for them.
Brooke, I guess the question would be, was there any financial consultant retained for this phase of the Sixplex study?
No, there was no financial consultant engaged for this portion of the multiplex study. There was financial analysis undertaken as part of the original multiplex work, but it's not something that we have undertaken so far. Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. And one comment, just so that everyone's aware, the presentation is available, and we're happy to share it by email. Just send an email to either Brooke or Daniel or anyone else on this call for that matter. And we're happy to help and flip the presentation over to you. And in later on at a later date, it will be posted online. So stay tuned for that. And if you're subscribed, you should receive an update, I believe, when it's updated. Okay, so next on my list, I have Conrad. So Conrad, I'm going to unmute you and welcome.
And other Daniels. That was a great presentation. A few comments, some might be very niche technical, but as you have scoped it, we're not talking about building code today. So my first question is on the bicycle requirements in the Toronto ZBL. Currently, a bicycle maintenance and repair facility is required in buildings with 5 or more long-term bicycle storage spaces. And if there has been a discussion or will be consideration of whether or not that requirement is appropriate for the scale of a 5 or a 6plex. Then the second question is, the zoning diagrams showed the 3rd floor step back requirement, which currently is in place above main wall height in the fourplexes, and whether or not there has been discussion as to whether or not that is appropriate for the 5 and 6plex scale, most notably when one is looking at panelized or modular construction. Having a step back introduces a significant amount of additional detailing and complexity and potential cases for leaks and drainage issues. The next commentary would be the Housing Accelerator Fund included both 2 points, one around 4-story building height permissions and the other one around 6-unit permissions. The diagrams that were shown showed a basement in many cases. It is well documented that basements introduce higher cost and certainly higher embodied carbon in construction. And so my question is whether or not there has been a concerted discussion around 4-story building heights, not just 6 units. Obviously, that leads into many tangents around the Ontario Building Code requirements. But from a design perspective, it would introduce the flexibility and the choice to look at either putting in a basement or doing a 4-story above grade building, hence significantly improving the feasibility of these buildings. And then my last comment was in Daniel's presentation, there was a note about a maximum number of bedrooms. And I'd just like to point out that that may be very challenging to actually regulate or define in the ways that architects may label rooms decide to do something
Okay, well,
like
thank
that.
you for your
Thank you.
comments. Much appreciated. Some of the things you raised, we are going to be reviewing during the performance standard refinement period. So especially things like bike parking is something we can dig into a little bit more in a more detailed way as we get into the second portion of the 5 and 6plex review. And it's also something that hasn't particularly been raised actually to this point, so I appreciate you raising it. And we will have a look at that over the course of the rest of the year. And I, appreciate your commentary and input on some of the rest of the items, including the bedroom number. It can be complicated for sure. Daniel, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I would say thanks, Conrad, for all the valuable insights. Yeah, we're still looking at the bedroom maximum zoning bylaw permission and how it would be written. We know that there's different ways that people can write things on an architectural plan, but it kind of goes back to something that we've also been hearing from residents about enforcement and properly identifying what kind of building permit applications coming forward. There were a lot of things brought up in residents association meetings about multi-tenant houses coming in as a duplex or a triplex. So one of the tools we're looking at to try and better sort of differentiate between the two is having a bedroom maximum. So we're still looking at that. And then eventually, once we have our draft bylaw, it will get posted online. And if you have any comments on it in specifics, you could definitely give us that feedback before it goes to council.
Thank you both, and thank you, Conrad. Next on the list, we have Craig. So Craig, I'm going to unmute you and welcome.
Much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great, thanks. I just want to start by saying I think the multiplex bylaw has been extremely successful. It's up there with the laneway suite bylaw in terms of its effectiveness and efficiency. As an architect, I love it, and as a resident, I appreciate its protections. So you all deserve to be commended for it, and I recommend small improvements, but little change. Also, sixplexes are a great idea, only as long as they're synchronized with the development chart provisions to allow the first 4 units to be exempt without requiring phasing. Otherwise, please blaze ahead. With respect to the bylaws for multiplexes, there are a few issues we've come across in designing these projects. The third floor step-ins that Conrad just mentioned have proven to be a challenge, mostly because they create a different volumetric requirement than the 3-5 slope roofs. So the fact that those are unequal in terms of the volume they create has been a challenge. I think the step-in requirement should be changed to match the roof line implications of the 3 and 5 slope. And I would also recommend that those be tied to minimum setback requirements, so that, like in the laneway policy, if you build beyond the required setbacks, one could avoid the volumetric complexities of those planes and step-ins if they wish to have a more sustainable building. Also, I think side yard setbacks have proven to be difficult, which is probably why many of the applications have been renovations instead of new construction. I think side yards should never be more than 0.9 meters in any case, as that seems to be consistent with established neighborhood setbacks and other typologies of similar form. Finally, the idea of limiting the number of bedrooms, I think, is completely inappropriate. I have designed dozens of multiplexes for all kinds of different use cases. And the only reason that such a thing would be proposed is as a NIMBY control mechanism to exclude new residents who need housing. There is no urban planning requirement for this, and no other form of housing has a bedroom maximum. So these should not be treated differently. The rooming house and tenant law policies already control the number of bedrooms. And if anyone has a problem with bedrooms in a housing unit, they should look to those policies to fix it, not the zoning bylaws. Finally, I also want to reiterate, there was a comment about the DC bylaws not aligning for garden suites and laneway suites. I can't stress enough how harmful this is to these projects and to residents. It's causing huge amounts of disruption to extend long beyond typical construction timelines. which is really affecting our neighborhoods, and it needs to be fixed immediately. I understand it's not in the scope of what you're doing, but synchronizing these policies is critical to the success of the multiplex bylaws, and it has to be mentioned. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments. Next on my list is Manny. So Manny, I am going to unmute you. And you should be able to speak now. Welcome. Manny?
And he's a little young.
Maybe we'll move on to the next hand raised, which is Madison. And that's double T Madison. So Madison, I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that you guys are hosting this forum, and I'll try to keep it quick. I know that some other members didn't pay you that courtesy. My curiosity is this: there's the awareness that more density will allow for more housing to get built. So I'm curious as to why, especially in areas where there's already considerable density in the downtown core around Trinity Bellwoods Park, for example, why in the world the city doesn't just let builders build? Why do we need these case studies and individual studies based on 30-foot wide lots, 22-foot wide lots, everything else in between? Like, this is coming from a builder. Just if you let us do it and you give us the incentives by reducing the DCs, we will do it. It's just becoming more precarious and long-winded this way. I find that the intention stated to bring housing to Toronto and create more affordable housing is inconsistent with this prolonged approach. Can you guys explain if you've considered a more expedient approach to rolling this out? And if not, why?
I can take a crack at that to begin with. We have a responsibility to builders, to folks who live in the neighborhoods, to folks who want to be living in Toronto, to everyone who's a constituent of the city and who participates in Toronto and its vibrancy. And part of that is actually taking the time to do analysis of lot fabric, of the building types, to look at how the zoning could be improved so that there's a reasonable expectation of the type of product that will be coming forward through different types of permissions, and to be able to lend, to provide sufficient analysis to also be able to know if something is going to be problematic for neighboring property owners or for just users of the city across the city. And so one of the things we do as part of these studies is to take time to actually pause, consider what might need to be updated, look at what the impacts of past permissions have been, go out and speak to people like we're doing tonight across a range of opinions and approaches and understandings of the issues so that we can start to get a better sense of what will best serve everyone who's participating in the city. Daniel, is there anything else you want to add?
Thanks, Brooke. Some of the last bits that you said were similar things that I was going to say, that there's a public process when it comes to making changes under the Planning Act. There's a public process. There's reports and recommendations that go to council. There's a decision body that makes these decisions. So there are processes in place, just like how builders and developers have processes themselves. They go through a review process to look at the financials of a project, bringing on consultants, construction teams. There is a review when it comes to everything to build across the city. And then one other point I'll say is that the aspect of as of right permissions is something where city staff are comfortable with those as of right permissions from the building envelope perspective, for example, where if it does go straight to building permit, then it doesn't need to have city staff taking a detailed look like the planning department. And that's something that we don't want to see being taken advantage of. And when we do make changes to zoning bylaws or policies, it's based on appropriate consultation and thoughtful engagement and research before a recommendation gets made. So that's a little bit sort of as to why there's a process behind things.
Thank you both. Next on my list is Garnet. Garnet, I'm going to unmute you, and you should be able to speak now. Welcome.
So thanks for putting this on. Appreciate it. Generally, I'm in support of these changes, but I also want to push further because 393 net new units over a year and a half is not enough to fix the housing crisis. So what can we do citywide to make this housing happen faster? Well, one thing that comes to mind is the increasing that 10-meter limit. I understand you're not considering that for this project, but like I get why you're doing it, prevents some complaints, but like we need to fix these things, guys. Look, I'm a high school teacher. I can't afford to live in the neighborhood I work in, and my students, they have no hope of moving out from their parents within any reasonable time frame. We need to do everything we can to support our young people and give them a hope of thriving in the city. Many are trying to get away from abusive situations. There's other vulnerable groups too, like the elderly and homeless people. We need to make these changes for them. And just kind of everyone, staff included, I'd like to just remind people that change in our neighborhoods happens no matter what we prefer. Your neighbor can sell their detached home, gut it, upgrade it, modernize it, whatever, and it'll look completely different than it does now. You might feel this is changing the fabric of the neighborhood, but the city has not and cannot force them to make it look different. These are massive changes to the neighborhood too, and they happen all the time. Some would say they don't fit. But if they renovate it to have more units, apparently that, they can't do that, right? That's basically what a lot of people are criticizing this for. Places like Eaton Street, which borders on the new Pape Danforth subway nexus, right? That is a sixplex. That's a row of sixplexes that have been there for over 30 years. It's illegal to build more like it right now. But if you know where to look, you can find examples like these all over Toronto, and they're just as much a fabric of the neighborhood as any other. Once they're here, no one notices them. They fit the neighborhood because they were here already. We have to stop being allergic to change. We can't continue to make decisions as if we have to prevent changes to neighborhoods, because we can't. Change is going to happen. We have to choose to provide opportunities for people like my students to move out from their abusive households. Our policies need to consider future residents, not just current ones. Sixplexes and even more dense places fit in our neighborhoods everywhere. Parents want their adult children and grandchildren to live around the corner from them. So let's allow that to happen. And just, my question was, I think, why can't we do more, right? Why can't we reduce approval times and costs? Why can't we build new housing? Why can't we do it faster? Is there some kind of path to increasing that height limit, the 10-meter height limit? Thanks for listening.
Much for that. I guess I'll start off and just to point out that the initiatives that we're here talking to you about this evening with respect to the multiplex monitoring program and the 6 units citywide are just 2 of city planning's housing initiatives that we are working on this year, and some projects started last year. So it's just one sort of option in terms of the overall toolkit that city planning has in terms of other, we are looking at projects to encourage mid-rise development. There are other projects looking at, more density around transit stations. So while it might not seem like, a few garden suites or a few multiplexes here or there are going to solve the housing crisis, I think when you look at these taken together, they are, providing options for people. And I think, we are also looking at, and we have a group in city planning that's looking at neighborhood intensification and what sort of the uptake might be in the next few decades. So that's a really good piece of research that is going to be coming out in June to sort of see what the impact, the overall impact would be. And that's just city planning. We are also looking at, city planning is aware of some process improvements. Those are things that we are going to be reporting on as well through monitoring. And there are other divisions in the city that are doing work to build housing quicker, as you pointed out. I don't know if anyone else wanted to say anything, but that's all I have to say. Thanks so much.
I think the only other thing I would add, and thank you for that, Corolla, is that since 2019, we have made 6 projects have come forward so far that have been approved, that have been adding new or reintroducing past housing types that have previously not been permitted in the city for a couple of decades at least. And so one of the things that we're trying to do in each of these steps that we're taking is to continue to add more opportunity, more options, more flexibility across the city. And for a long time, we were looking at intensification only in nodes and centers. And since 2019, we've been working very actively to be spreading that density more evenly across the city, to be able to provide more opportunities for people to live in the neighborhoods that they grew up in, to downsize in the neighborhoods that they've been living in for decades, to be able to have a wider range of folks be able to afford to live in our neighborhoods than has been possible for quite a bit of time now. So while I appreciate that everyone's impatient, it's nice to see that there's interest in also encouraging more opportunities and more options, especially when it is more on a citywide basis. And it's something that has been undertaken over the last 6 years or so and will continue for several years to go as we continue to work our way through our housing action plan and the Housing Accelerator Fund projects and get them implemented. And I don't know if Daniel wants to add anything to that.
No, in the sake of time as well, I'm
Yep.
good if we move on to the next question.
Excellent.
And just on the topic of time, we are approaching 8 o'clock and we have a number of hands up. So in an effort to try to get to as many questions and comments as we can, please strive for brevity. My next on the list is Natalie. Natalie, I am going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
Thank you for the presentation and everything that you guys are doing. I'm going to be honest. I'm not in favor. I'm in favor of multiplexes, but done correctly and situated correctly. There's lack of parking in all the design plans that you have shared. So we should be looking to situate these multiplexes on main streets where there is subway or some type of transit, whether be a bus line that can quickly take people to subway stations or GO train stations. So that's something that, rather than putting in a CN tower in the middle of a sea of bungalows, maybe keep these units closer to major streets and intersections. I'm also concerned about privacy. Can't help fourplexes are already in play, but can we please have a requirement that the builders have to plant trees that will provide privacy to those surrounding neighbors who are going to be in a bungalow and can't be out in their backyard with potentially having people overlooking into their yard. That's a huge concern for me. Family, young kids, swimming pool. I don't want people staring into my backyard. So I would greatly appreciate if there's a requirement to start planting vegetation to protect the privacy of surrounding neighbors. They're the ones coming in. You want to build, and on top of it, your for-profit builders not not-for-profit builders. Don't know how we're going to build housing that is attainable for various income levels, as Daniel touched upon in the beginning of the meeting, if we have for-profit builders. So you're going to charge a market rate, you're going to charge this, you know, this kind of high rents to these individuals, then you should be responsible to protect the privacy of the other people around you. Also, I'd like to touch on the lack of accessibility. We talked about aging in place. These individuals may not be able to walk up 2 flights of stairs to get to their unit. I did not see one plan that tried to accommodate for people with walkers, wheelchairs. So I'd really like that to be taken into consideration, because, I mean, if that's what we're trying to solve here, then I think the plans need to be reflect that kind of stuff more realistically. And I'm also would like to know
Natalie, I think we're gonna have to cut it there for the time being, but we do have Brooke who is able to speak to some of your comments. Brooke.
Yep. Thanks, Daniel. So on the accessibility point, it is something that is being modeled as part of the additional refinement work that we're working with an architecture firm on, to be finding ways to be able to accommodate and encourage accessible units, especially at the ground floor level, so that they might be able to be larger, that they might be able to be built to universal design standards, and are set up so that the zoning regulations are in place to encourage people to be able to get into those ground floor accessible units without having to deal with stairs or other issues. It may not be something that fits on all sites, but it is something that we're taking forward, and it is something that is part of the modeling. And we're working with an architecture firm specifically to ensure that we're able to do that.
Thank you, Brooke. Next on my list is Pamela. So Pamela, I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
You, as someone who is trying to build a new build sixplex in the city for family and friends, for aging in place with an elevator, I will add, and also as a planner who's concerned with the broader implications of this and the policy that's involved. In terms of the zoning and the OPA, I think all of that is great. For me, the same box as a fourplex would work just fine for a sixplex. What would really help is to reclassify a 6-unit apartment or a 5-unit apartment to a multiplex, so that some of the other provisions that kick in when it's an apartment are removed. There's a lot of weird things there, like visitor parking requirements, side yard setbacks, the bike parking that's already been mentioned. There's a lot of weird things that would apply to an apartment building that don't apply to multiplex. So that simple reclassification would be really helpful. And then I think there's a couple other things that I'm wondering if the city's considering. The whole issue of the financial has already been mentioned. I think that's really important, that the financial incentives are the same for fourplexes as they are for the sixplexes, so that the DCs and the parks levies are waived. These things are all like marginal at best, so that would really help. And then the other thing is really about stairs, which has only really been mentioned in passing. And I'm not sure if the modeling that you did actually looked at internal stairs, but as you know, you either need 2 shared stairs, or would we be having like 6 sets of private stairs? You know, either of those options is really onerous in terms of a small footprint building and very inefficient. So I'm wondering if staff would prepare a guideline for a standardized alternative solution that the city will accept to allow a single stair in up to 6 plexes. I think that would be incredibly helpful. As you know, the single stair allows better layouts, light-filled units, more efficiency, and the current system where we have a one-off alternative solution process really adds a lot of time and uncertainty. I'm involved in that now. I've submitted for a building permit and an alternative solution, which we have to do prior to applying to Committee of Adjustment, so it adds an extra step. And the other thing I would just like to note is that alternative solution, if you were to consider that, it would have to be reasonable for a 3-story Part 9 OBC building. In other words, the solution would have to be probably different from an alternative solution for a mid-rise building, because otherwise what can happen is that alternative solution itself becomes too onerous and too costly for a small 6-unit building. If you're requiring sprinklering or wider stairs or materials or added vestibules, all those things kind of add up to the point where there may or may not be any net benefit from that. So thank you for that.
So thank you very much for the comments. As I mentioned before, on the Sixplex review, we are working with an architecture firm to be doing some of the modeling. And a lot of the modeling we're doing is to look at some of that internal circulation and how to best maximize the opportunity for putting these additional units into a 3-story building and trying to not move past the Part 9 building requirements. We're also working with the building department and their Ontario Building Code specialists, as well as the folks who work with our fire department on safety and fire requirements that are all balled up together in what we're discussing here. The fire chief and some building code folks, and I apologize if I do not remember specifically who worked on this, but brought a report forward to Planning and Housing Committee in the fall of 2024, discussing the alternative solutions for the requirement for dual exits, as well as some of the other things that you mentioned. And we are, at this time, while we're consulting with those folks, we are not able to recommend changes to the building code or the fire code, but we are working with those folks. Some of those things are going to have to be reviewed at that level, and it's something that has to be negotiated with the province. But thank you for your input. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you both. And next on my list is Roddy. So Roddy, I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome. Roddy, you should be unmuted and able to speak. Okay, we're going to move to Makita. So Makita, you are unmuted and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, I think it's important as a developer. I own a few projects in the city, and I think it's important to understand the historical context a little bit and the kind of the future context of what we need here. You know, the country Canada is missing about 3.5 million residential units. We'll be missing that by the year 2030. And really, the question is, I guess, are these sixplexes going to be enough for the city of Toronto to build the majority of those units, right? Like, if we have to build that many apartments and homes for people, we obviously want that in the city of Toronto. And I've heard that there's some potential conversations about allowing larger developments than sixplexes. But you know, my feedback as someone who's looking to develop a property in the city of Toronto, it's pretty difficult to make the numbers work. And if the process was faster, at the very least, I think that would save a lot of headaches. I'm not sure what that would require, but do you have any comments on how to make this process faster? And maybe what's the fastest you've seen one of these small multi, like a triplex or a fourplex development, go through the process and get built?
Brooke, Daniel, do either of you want to?
I was trying to find something quickly. What I'll say is I had a lot of tables, I had a lot of graphs and charts. I haven't charted that out yet, but we are measuring the length of the permit cycle from when it comes into Toronto buildings, when it gets issued, and when it becomes final if the permit has been closed out. So I don't have the averages for you right now, but I will say that they will become a part of the final report that goes forward in June. But if you would like to have a discussion with me offline, you could reach out to me and then I could talk to you a little bit about some of those findings.
Thank you both. Next on the list is Jeff. So Jeff, you are unmuted and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
How you doing? I guess one thing I'm just curious about is what's the lead up time that a neighborhood would get that this was coming in? Like, are we talking weeks or a month or? Hello?
Sorry, are you speaking about the study about sixplexes?
Yeah, I mean, if a sixplex or even one of these fourplexes was going to come into a neighborhood, I'm surrounded by bungalows, and it's a relatively quiet street. That's why I bought it. That's why I spent my life savings on it to get that type of thing. We didn't want to live in the downtown area. So I'm concerned, obviously, with what's going to happen to our neighborhood if suddenly I've got 10, 12 people living next door to me, where I have a nice old couple that lives next to me right now. Quiet, no dogs. The dogs in the neighborhood, of course, are nice and quiet, but what if we get 12 people and, so I'm just curious, what's the lead up time or from one of these things being applied for? When would the public know so we could act against it, say? I'm all for these things, by the way, but not
I'll touch on
not in the wrong area. Sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Jeff. So fourplexes, those are permitted as of right across the whole city on residential lands. If a project is as of right and it doesn't deviate from the zoning bylaw, then anyone could submit a permit to Toronto Buildings. And if that permit gets approved, then they can start construction at that point, and there's no notification requirements for as of right buildings. But from a sixplex perspective, maybe Brooke, you could let us know when the study originated, and then I guess the timeline of when things would be potentially wrapping up.
Sure. So the first direction to staff to undertake a review of 5 and 6plexes started middle of 2023 with the original multiplex study concluding. And the work that for Ward 23 started a little bit after that. And we have been working with the Ward 23 staff as well as picking up where they left off to be undertaking this analysis and review. Since then, we are looking to bring this report forward for council's decision making in June of this year. Following that, once notice of adoption, should it be adopted, is sent out, there's a 20-day appeal period that is undertaken. And the fastest that this could be in place and moving forward to provide as of right zoning permissions for these 5 and 6plexes would be sometime around the beginning of August. That being said, like the fourplexes, this is an initiative to bring forward as of right permission so that if someone can develop one of these buildings requiring no changes to any of the performance standards in the zoning bylaw, then they will be able to move forward to building permit and be able to start work on their project. If they do require a variance, then they would need to apply to the Committee of Adjustment, and the timing around Committee of Adjustment meetings can vary depending on how busy they are, but generally folks are able to get in within a month or two to be able to have their case heard and their variance request considered.
And I'll just jump in with one point. I didn't want to suggest that every single fourplex is as of right, Jeff. If a project does not comply with the zoning bylaw for a multiplex, then that person can decide to go to the Committee of Adjustment to try and be granted variance approval for how the building deviates from the zoning bylaw, and that is a public process. You would receive notice of the application, and then you can either submit a letter with your concerns to the Committee of Adjustment or speak before the Committee of Adjustment about any concerns you have.
Thank you all. And the next hand up is Irene. So Irene, you should be unmuted and able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me okay? I'm on my cell phone.
Yes, we can.
Okay, fine. So my basic comments are, my family are living out your policies and the increased density that's going across the city at the moment. While I'm generally in favour of increased density, this is what happens. Our family live at 178 Oak Park Avenue in East York, which is a low-rise, one floor, maybe 2 floors, on a residential street. The street across the back from us is Gledhill Avenue, which has a number of narrow double lots. So at 191 Gledhill Avenue, there was a complete new build, and it was a basement and 3 floors. So that's 4 condo units in the front building, and a garden, a 2-floor garden suite, with a 5-foot, with a, I think it's whatever difference there is between the main building and the garden suite. So the 2-floor garden suite is now 5 feet from my back property. So that was a loss of privacy. And then at 189 Gledhill, they applied
Irene,
to build. Yeah.
Apologies for interrupting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't mean. I just mean, like, please be very careful and consult the neighborhood and look into what is happening in the neighborhoods when this increased density comes in. I mean, I can't imagine what a 3-story condo would look like at 5 feet from my back, from my back fence. And also, there's been no, so the builder is not obliged to supply any trees or any coverage. So I just want you to be very careful, and I would like you to monitor, including your monitoring, the surrounding neighbours and what that's going to mean to the surrounding neighbours when Sixplexes go in. So thanks for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Irene. Next on the list is Frank. So Frank, you are now unmuted, and welcome.
The architect for 40 Snowden, and we've been through a lot on the fourplexes. So I don't think there's enough time to discuss what we were trying to do or what we are trying to do. I would like to, if possible, meet with Brooke and Daniel to discuss the difficulties that we faced. But our idea for this project was to actually resolve the affordability of housing in more expensive neighborhoods. And the whole neighborhood was against us. So the
Frank,
intent was...
what I could say is, like I said earlier in the meeting, we don't want to just focus in on a specific issue that was stressful. It's not the right venue for it, but we can admit, Frank, we're happy to meet with you offline, but we don't want to just sort of speak to all of this in this platform. So please connect with myself and Brooke, and we're happy to have a discussion with you.
And next on my list is Ash. Ash, I'm trying to find you. And Ash, you should be unmuted. Oh, went back on mute. Okay, we'll go to the next hand raised, which is Jen. So Jen, I'll be unmuting you shortly. And just so you know, just so that everyone's aware, the time now is 8:03. We are going to continue till about 8:15. So we have 10 minutes. So please, as questions and comments come up, please try your best to be brief and clear and concise. So Jen, you are unmuted. Welcome.
One of the points that I believe one of your planner, reclassification to apartments to keep weird policies. I tend to agree with that, because my point earlier on was that when you're looking at sixplexes, there could be potential that it's an apartment, and there's regulations for reasons to have those regulations for small apartments. And I believe that that should be looked at. I don't know that multiplexes will cover the situations. Visitors parking, that's an issue when there's parking issues. And basically, just to keep it very brief, other than they're being built in detached houses, not necessarily going to happen, could be brand new. I believe that it could be used to circumvent policies of detached housing. That's why it should be an apartment. And under the regulations, there's Landlord and Tenants Acts that should be regulated on these developments. Basically, people are leaving Toronto. Condos are sitting empty. Developers are sitting on properties. I'm looking at one right now for years, empty, not rented. I can understand that the architects and the developers and the builders, the planners, they're wonderful. We need them, but you're also making money. Okay. And we all know this. So what I want to know, and there's good and bad in all, there's got to be some regulations. So I like the idea of reclassifying multiplexes. I would rather not have sixplexes in those areas that were in yellow. Some may be appropriate, like some mainstream streets, some may not. And all these units should be affordable. I cannot, and of course it comes back to money. So an affordable and accessible, those units should actually be in every particular one. If you're going to have a multiplex, you should have an affordable unit. You should have an accessible unit, and that should be policy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jen. And so next on my list is a call-in user with the last three digits as 573. So I'm going to unmute you and you should be able to speak. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I think expanding housing permissions is very important. And and as a renter in Toronto, I want to really need to see more housing to make to increase supply and thus make it more affordable. And I want to see this particular program additionally succeed. And for that to happen, we would need to several things would need to happen to the building envelope. I think first of all, none are very minimal side setbacks. I think the setback should be wide enough for someone to pass through, but not necessarily wider. So I think about 80 centimeters would do that. Also, I think some people raised, an architect raised a problem of an issue relating to increased expense as it has to do with stepping back above floor number 2 or 3 or something. So there should be no such requirements. I think how a building looks has a lot to do with ornamentation, and I think an ordinary box, as we used to build would look quite nice. And I guess there are certain, of course, this all needs to be standardized throughout the city because I know some people express desires for special conditions or something, but there are risks that that could invite other problems. I think that's it for me, considering the time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for sharing your comments. So next, in terms of the hands up, is Boris. So Boris, you should be unmuted and welcome.
This is Boris. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for the presentation and the data that you shared with us earlier. Very helpful. I would just like to understand my perspective living in a neighborhood which has had some proposals. Of the 250 building applications that were approved or issued, how many of those were for new builds? And for the new builds, how many of those had variances attached to them? And for those with variances, how many objections did you have from neighbors? Because what I'm seeing, and this, I don't have a large sample size, but what I'm seeing is that the building envelope that's being proposed isn't being adhered to. So I'm just curious to understand if that's something that's happening across the board or just in a few cases with exceptions. So that's one question. The second question I have is the FSI. So in our neighborhood, we have an FSI constraint, but it doesn't apply to the multiplexes. So normally, a single family in our neighborhood is limited to 35% coverage. But we've seen, often exceptions with or variances approved with 50% coverage. But when we look at the multiplex dimensions and what the equivalent FSI would be, it's about 1.5 times. So that's 3 times. So the equivalent multiplex, fourplex today would have an FSI comparable to a single family house of 1.5, whereas a single family house in our neighborhood is limited to 0.5. So it just means that the size-wise, the scale is about 3 times what the scale is for a normal house in our neighborhood. And how does that not impact the neighborhood character and just the density not being an issue with like the many factors that have been raised by other participants here? And lastly, when I've spent most of my savings, buying a house and living in my neighborhood, and for me, privacy was important. And having a large disproportional multiplex go up next to my single-family house is definitely going to erode the value of my house and my savings. So how is that being factored into the consideration whether the multiplexes are being approved or not, or being considered? That's it for me.
Thanks, Boris. A few questions there. I'll try and get to all of them quickly. First question was about tracking minor variances for the permits that have been issued. We do have minor variance data. We're still going through all of it. By June, and when our report goes forward, we will have a more detailed analysis of how many permits within the first 223 went to the Committee of Adjustment. There is a breakdown of how many are new construction and how many are renovations. We will identify how many of the new construction projects went to the Committee of Adjustment. I can say at a high level, of the 222 permits, not a significant number of minor variance applications were required. Then in regard to the building envelope of a multiplex not having FSI regulating it, I'll point out, and I'll go back to the thinking inside the box approach again, which is setting the building envelope for the multiplex. Across the city of Toronto, the vast majority of properties are permitted to have building heights of 9.5 meters for a single detached dwelling. Multiplexes have the permission of being 10 meters. The building length and depth of the multiplex matches the single detached dwelling as well. But if the lot is much larger in depth or width, then there are permissions to allow for that multiplex to go to 17 or 19 meters. But the remainder of the setbacks are all the same of the single detached dwellings. So the actual building itself, the multiplex, is almost the same as the planned context for a single detached dwelling. But because there are more units permitted within the multiplex, there are additional flexibility measures within the policy that was put forward and the zoning bylaw to remove density. We are looking at what the density numbers are for these multiplexes that have been issued to see what those density numbers look like. I know you said everything or most are 1.5 times the area of the lot. We'll confirm that within our study as well. And I'll just note that everyone on their own lot has the right to develop their property how they would like. So in terms of the values of properties, there's not much I could really say to that point. Everyone has the ability to put forward a building application, but we do want to ensure that our neighborhoods have more options for people to live. It is very challenging to find housing across the city, and multiplexes are a good way of doing that in areas where infrastructure is already existing.
Thank you very much. And for the last question of the night, I'm going to call on Madison A. And for those of you who have had your hand raised the entire meeting, I just want to thank you for your patience. And we are accepting comments at ehon, EHON, at toronto.ca if you'd like to share your thoughts, questions, or comments with the project team. But moving to the last commenter, Madison, you are unmuted. Welcome.
Just wanted to echo some of the earlier comments about the need to consider this on an issue on a ward by ward basis. I'm in Davenport, and we had by far the most multiplex applications, as you showed. But then I was struck by the mismatch between the plans for how sixplexes can be fit on existing lots and our average lot size. I couldn't even think of a single lot that is at the narrow lot size that you showed, which is about 25 feet. That's really not common in the area. And so I'm concerned that these buildings don't feasibly fit on the lots in the neighborhoods where they're actually going to be built, and that then they're going to be sort of shoehorned in and result in really small units that might not be attractive to families and kind of meet those goals that you have. So I just want to know what's been talked about and thought about the overlap between where these are most likely to be built and what the lot availability actually is, and how that's being considered to kind of do it maybe gradually or ward by ward. Thank you.
So thank you for that. One of the reasons we were looking at the lot sizes that we are is that they are representative lot sizes in parts of the city where we haven't had as much uptake of multiplexes. And so we wanted to have a look at what the possibility might be, especially in areas that have slightly larger lots who might be able to accommodate slightly more units within the larger houses that are also typically on those larger lots in the other areas of the city where there hasn't been quite as much uptake. We agree with you that sixplexes may not fit on every lot all the way across the city. But one of the things we are doing to be addressing some of the concerns that you're raising is also looking at that second phase of this work, which is to look at parts of the city where they may not fit as they are currently being proposed, so we can do some more refinement and see what might be possible. But I take your point, and it's well made, and we very much appreciate your input.
So what I'll say as we wrap up the meeting, we wanted to again thank everybody for participating and sticking around for the whole meeting. Apologies again for anyone who wasn't able to speak tonight, but our contact information is up on the screen right now. We also have the general EHON inbox email address that you can email, but for the multiplex monitoring team, you can email myself or give me a call at any time. And then with the Sixplex team, we have Brooke Marshall, who was here tonight, and then Kajia Kimich, another senior planner, who you could email or give a phone call to. You could follow along with the status of both projects on the EHON City of Toronto website. So just do a Google search, it'll come up. Thanks to Daniel Hahn for facilitating tonight's meeting, and then to all my other colleagues helping out with the presentation. And again, wanted to thank everybody for joining us this evening. There will be more opportunities to discuss with us, again, like over email or phone calls, and the Sixplex team has some in-person stuff for people to participate in. If you have other questions about that, again, just reach out to us. And with that, enjoy the rest of your night, and yeah, have a good evening. Thank you, everybody.